What is up, everyone? Welcome to the Occult Rejects. In this episode, I have, obviously myself, and I have Ethan Indigo. He's been on the show before, and I think on the NY Patriot show. I'm not sure actually anymore.
Yeah, I think
both, maybe.
yeah.
And we've had him on before, and I had some really interesting discussions. And I've told him in the past, whenever you have a topic you'd like to talk about, just hit me up, and I think we can make it happen. And he hit me up to talk about Thoth and the number 8. And I just had Branch on recently, and I thought that was a great discussion. And like I've said before, I've seen him in chat, and he's always added some good stuff. And I wanted to bring him into the mix because I just thought it'd be the three of us, a good discussion. Unfortunately, I had the Headless Giant also that was supposed to jump on with us, and we were having technical difficulties with him for a bit because of the echo, and then he just can't even get onto the internet now. So unfortunately, he will be missed, but hopefully on the next one, he will join us. That's enough out of me. I'm going to let these gentlemen introduce themselves. Branch, I'll let you go, and then we'll leave it up to Ethan after that.
Well, it's good to be back so soon. My name's Joshua. I go by the Branch or NPC 3.14 when I'm doing streams. You can find me on Telegram as the Branch. Always happy to strike up a conversation with folks and perhaps be a guest. And you can find me on Instagram as Appalachian Aesthetic. Been into occult studies and religion studies for many years now. I'm Freemason and belong to the Orthodox Church. So this is the type of stuff I really enjoy, and the mysteries of life, and also sharing them with others.
Thank you very much.
Beautiful.
Oh, you said do you follow me on Instagram?
I think recently we finally made that connection. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Message me so I know who you are, and then I'll add you back because that might be an easier way for me to get in touch with you because I do check that more often. Just
okay. And I usually use a lamb icon. I got a stained glass here in my bedroom. That's the Lamb of Revelation standing on a book. So most of the things I use, that's the icon. So you'll be able to recognize it with that.
For sure. Awesome. And thank you very much for coming on again, like you said, and even in such a short notice and time. And his links, I'm pretty sure right now are already in the live. I'm pretty sure I copied them over from the last show that he was on. If not, I'm sorry, but I'm almost 100% positive they're in there now, as well as Ethan's. But Ethan, introduce yourself and let everybody know who you are again.
Most excellent. Honored to be here discussing with you guys, communicating with you. Thank you so much, Nick, Patriot.
Of course.
Ethan Indigo Smith. I've written a few books. I, always come into things from a universalist perspective, trying to, find the correspondences within different systems or supposedly different systems. I practice Tai Chi and I write a lot. And so the idea that I recently was considering would be a good discussion is how 7 is
oh boy, what happened? Damn, guess we froze on him too.
I'm here.
Yeah, you're there.
Okay.
All right, so
just kind of troubleshooting there for a moment.
Yeah, I was afraid this would happen. Oh well, that's what happens when you go live.
So tonight's topic is 8. Is that what he was about to say?
Yeah, 8 and Thoth. And funny little tidbit. I was going to mention this anyway, so I'll just bring this up now just to waste time. When he had hit me up about this, I had just got done recording something, one of the Gilgo Beach episodes, and I was talking about how I think like Shannon Gilbert, I may be wrong, but like one of the parts of her names or whatever, like also equal Thoth, and she also has a story of being at house number 8 on Gilgo Beach where she was, and I was just like, yo, that's like really weird how like she was on house number 8 and Thoth even comes up in the name. So I mentioned that, and I just thought it was weird, and like literally a few hours after I did that, recorded that, he had hit me up and told me, "Oh, I have an idea talking about Thoth equaling the number 8." And I was like, "What the fuck?" I was like, "Oh, you got to come on now." It's just the timing was so damn weird, And I was just like, "Sure, why not?"
Something that strikes me interesting about 8 is how it reminds me a little bit of Pisces or Cancer, how it mirrors itself and
Yeah.
has this almost like a dualism in it. And Hermes is a lot of times associated with Thoth in that Thoth Atlantean role. And Mercury is the solvent that brings the male and female together. So really, you could almost view the 8 as masculine and feminine kind of united.
I was saying that to him earlier that well, both I agree with both things you just said. And hopefully like we're not talking too much about stuff that he was going to bring up, but I was even telling him before how sometimes I do think that's kind of like 7 is more of like maybe like the feminine energy, and like the 1 is the male energy that like fuels it, or I guess gives it life or whatever, the energy within it. So I was even saying like I think that like 8 could just be like the 1 and the 7 together, or still representing basically what you were saying, male and female together. I do think it's both energies working together.
It's kind of interesting because 9 does kind of look like a 7 and an 8 together, if you really just look at it. I didn't think about that till just now.
Me and him were even saying before you jumped on that even 9, going by certain, I mean, even if you were to go into, not to bring him up, Crowley 777 or anybody others books of correlations and stuff like that, a lot of people do attribute Thoth also with the moon. So I mean, again, if you want to go back to Kabbalistic numerology and stuff like that, which I'm sure these people think of before they start making these lists, I can see how Thoth would also go with 9.
May I interject real quick? Welcome back, Ethan.
Oh yeah, sorry for the bad connection, you guys.
I wasn't sure if this would come up organically, and so since you mentioned the moon, I would say that both the moon and the sun have this analemma pattern kind of that they follow in the sky, like an 8 infinity sign. Although it's not perfectly symmetrical, it seems to be elongated on one end with the sun.
Yes,
so,
yes, you're
but
right.
I could see the association with 8 and the moon being pretty solid there.
Yeah, real quick before we let Ethan get back, you're mentioning that 8 kind of thing. In the eyeball series that we did, I'm almost positive it was the first or second part. We were covering something with the eye, and Teresa had brought that up and was like somehow showing that with something with the eyeball. So that's interesting because like you can see like it's almost a small end and a fatter end, like you were saying. It's not perfect, And if you think about it, it's almost kind of like a maybe like a fish with a small tail or something weird like that. I don't know, but it's definitely not perfect. All right, so there you go. Ethan is back.
So thanks, you guys.
Of course, that's why I got Branch here, in case you disappear.
Yeah, and hopefully that doesn't fart out again. So Thoth, of course, is celebrated in the city of 8. I'm presuming you guys presented and discussed a little bit, and he also is comes in different iterations, but this city of 8, I think, is one of the oldest, of course, being Egyptian, and in a sense he's kind of riding on the 8 Neters, the Ogdoad of the Neters, being primordial Egyptian gods and goddesses, and actually the 8, as we'll see in a lot of senses, is 4 pair, right? And so the Ogdoad of the Neters is actually 4 pairs, 4 couples of masculine and feminine gods and goddesses. And
you see, that's interesting because I hate to just interrupt you, but like
don't feel that way.
Thoth is like a lower arc of like Chesed or Jupiter, and you would get like the 4 and then multiplying to 8.
Right. And I was going to say, Thoth through the Bin Ben table is associated with the tarot. And one way, I'm not a tarot reader or practitioner, but I know there are different ways to read the tarot of the four suits. And if they're upright or upside down, that is, there's 8 ways, right? There's 8 kind of dynamic, a 4 pair, if you will. And so Thoth is worshiping these primordial gods or energies. And in that sense, we can maybe intuit that that's how he's able to transverse dimensions, right? And that's Thoth's big thing, is he's even able to help Ra, who can't do what he can do by his power on the physical realm. He can go into the metaphysical realm as well.
He was the one who wrote the magic spell to bring Osiris
Right.
back to Isis. I mean, he was even involved in that. Most people may not know that.
Yeah, he's always finalizing and assisting the problem, the solution to the problem. Maybe not always, but so many times, so frequently.
May I,
please,
just to kind of add on to that, one of those things he aided in as well was didn't he help define the eye of wisdom for Atum when it fled from him in the abyss? So he went and found the eye. Well, he went and found his children first, which was the 2 lions, Tefnut and the other 2 lion children. He fetched them from the abyss. And then also when Sophia ran from him, he found her and coaxed her back. So I think that there's this association too, maybe with the blue right eye of wisdom. I think it would be perhaps. Go ahead.
Beautiful, man. And that story too, I believe it's very specific how many times Thoth has to call her on Ra's behalf. 1,077 times.
I forgot about that.
Which is 3 short of 1080, 3 short of 1,080, right? Which is 360s, of course, and also just a neat number. It's 10 of 180. 108 as well. So interesting aspect of that story. Thoth being the assistant that cries. And Teresa adds that there's 8 limbs of yoga, which is a wonderful build, because that's another 8-element dynamic that really helps us deal with the gravity of the situation, which is earthly existence. And there's also the Eightfold Path of Buddhism, which is very much in line with. Let me present this quote. But Buddha presents the problem that is this existence in a 4-fold dynamic, right? There is suffering. There is a solution to suffering. The solution is the Eightfold Path. I forget the third and however the order is, but essentially like that in a 4-thought process. So the problem. Please.
May I interject real quick? Please. As you were saying that, in my mind, I saw the Sephiroth tree in the paths. So is the Eightfold Path perhaps translated to the Sephiroth? Anyway, sorry to interrupt.
No, it's an interesting thought, and it reminds me of the chakra system is 7. Right, of course, we know it as 7 most frequently, but it can also be thought of as a different number sets. But within 8, we have this comprehension to help us deal with the elements of reality. But in the 7, the importance of the 7 and why 8 is overlooked with the 7. The 7 is crucial because it has a center point. And with the chakra system, the center is the heart chakra, right? So the 7 is crucial for that, but there is still the invisible 8th. And so Patanjali is said to be the author of the Yoga Sutras, who this is where we get the 8 limbs of yoga from. And Patanjali obviously from India and Tibet type of area. He has a snake body, and he comes from heaven. And back to Thoth, excuse me, before I continue, he carries a staff and is very snake-like. And his staff has the two snakes, which when they wrap together form another aspect, a symbological depiction of 8.
Good
right?
point.
And so Patanjali is actually, one could consider, iteration of this Thoth energy, right? And he brings to us the 8 limbs of yoga, among many other teachings, wisdom teachings, metaphysical teachings, and healing teachings, just like that Thoth energy of Egypt is said to.
But I add also, when you again, I'm only going to try to interrupt when I already have.
No, I love it,
down.
and you're not interrupting. This is a great build.
Because I was thinking, like, how am I going to bring these things up, and then you'll mention them. I'm like, oh, okay. So you mentioned the 2 snakes on the caduceus staff. Well, another place we see 2 snakes intertwined in a way is in that very famous imagery. I actually just checked out a book at the library today with this very thing on it. The red and white dragons of alchemy. The Ouroboros that's eating its tail. We see those same 2 serpents going in a circle there. Did his feed freeze?
Oh yeah, I think so.
Hoping to get his response to that, because it really. So that would be like the Ida and the Pingala.
Yes,
twin
that's
serpents. Yeah, and
I think somebody may have mentioned it, or maybe I brought it up. But like, even like, joking around, but like the never-ending story, which is something I've referred to a bunch of times for occult symbolism. Even in that, it's on the front of the book that the kid's reading.
That's the Arwen. Is that what it's
something
called?
that's very close looking to like all these different intertwining.
It's a silver and gold snake, actually. I used to always think it was the same color, but when I looked at it really closely, yeah, they're 2 different colors. And he has to kind of unite those 2 sides of himself in order to complete his journey. So I think that symbol is very much the symbol of the hero's journey in a way, like the completion of the great work, that sort of thing.
Yes.
And one of my favorite scenes from that movie is when he's traversing the desert and he's got to pass between the 2 sphinxes. And that's where he has his heart tested and his armor. He has invisible armor of faith. The knight trundles along on the horse and gets zapped and killed, but he has that invisible armor, which is kind of like what we read about in the Bible when it talks about the armor of God in Ephesians. So we see that Atreyu has that. Ethan, we were talking about the way this 2 snake motif could relate to the 2 snakes of alchemy, or the Ida and Pingala.
Beautiful.
Oh, okay, he's back. So that's kind of where we left off.
Right, yeah, and I heard briefly the white and red snake, and that's right there, in line with that power, right? That idea. Neat. Well, beautiful. You got the picture right there. Cool.
If your bandwidth keeps becoming an issue, you could even try just using your mic and not your camera.
Oh, yeah, no, I think it's beyond that, but
okay. One of the things I mentioned about the never-ending story was how that is a kind of a story of the hero's journey, and he has to unite those 2 sides of himself.
And Patanjali has the snake aspect below his waist, and human form above, so which kind of lends to that uniting of our primal nature with our higher self type of thing.
Abraxas as well.
Mm-hmm.
And the chariot card.
I don't want to, I don't think I'm, sorry if I'm getting ahead of stuff that you had to say.
No, I
think you kind of mentioned it earlier, and I meant to say something, and then I forgot. But you were talking about how like messenger type, or in my opinion, I can see how Thoth and other gods that he can be associated with. But very much in between both worlds, back and forth, back and forth. You know what I'm saying? And I see that sometimes with the 8. You know, I wonder if that's like,
yeah, well, another wonder. So Thoth directly has a relationship with tarot, which has that intuitive um, divination aspect to it. Another iteration of Thoth is in the Norse mythology, right? Odin rides on Sleipnir, which is his 8-legged horse.
Yeah, man.
Right, and so, and he is famous for bringing the measurement of intuition system of the runes, and so but what does he ride on? 8 principles one could symbologically extract. I'm not saying that's necessarily what it is, but and he's also able to go through, I think they have 9-dimensional understanding in that story set.
Wasn't there something special about the tail of the horse as well? Did it?
I'm ignorant at what it is, but
I thought maybe it was a snake or something.
Interesting. Well, that's a possibility. I know that mostly he's depicted with 1 head. Sometimes he had 4 in the very few depictions.
Odin?
No, the horse. No, the horse.
Oh, excuse me.
No.
Well, that's interesting because the heliodrome of Mithraism, or the Tetragrammaton as well, and even in Revelation, there are 4 horses, and so the heliodrome is the person sitting in the chariot controlling 4 horses.
And
so
and
really
before, like I mentioned before, the 8 is kind of a 4 pair, right? It's a duality of 4 in a sense. So the 4 is there again in the 8. If I may read this Eastern philosophical quick little thing that actually relates the Taoist idea that is kind of integrated all across the world, and with this polarity understanding that brings us to the 8. As the great ultimate, or what we call the yin yang symbol, as the great ultimate becomes differentiated, the 2 modes, yin and yang, appear. Yang descends and interacts with yin, and yin rises to interact with yang. And consequently, the 4 forms come out of the 2, which are major and minor yin and yang, right? So, and consequently, the 4 forms are constituted. Yin and yang interact and generate the 4 forms of heaven. The element of weakness, the element of strength interact and generate the 4 forms of earth, and consequently the 8 elements, which is the Bagua: heaven, water, fire, thunder, wind, water in motion, mountain, and earth, just for a brief reference. So the 8 elements are completed, and the 8 elements intermingle and generate the myriad things. In Taoist philosophy, that's how the yin and yang kind of encompasses everything. One more little read briefly. This is from a coffin that's in Cairo, that's a couple of thousand years old, coffin of Petamon. I am 1 that transforms into 2. I am 2 that transforms into 4. I am 4 that transforms into 8. After this, I am 1. So excuse me if that's redundant, but this kind of abstraction and doubling is where we get the Bagua, the 8 elements of the Taoist philosophical metaphysical tradition, that are very much akin to that Odin idea that's riding the 8 principles, right? And thereby kind of getting these intuitive notes through the runes. And so the 8 elements of the Bagua of course, are where we get the 64 changes of the Book of Changes. So it multiplies again. And so the I Ching, which is the oldest book that's still in print, right, is based on the Bagua, the 8 elements. And this is said to be written by none other than Fu Zi. And Fu Zi is the same kind of body. Fu Zi is paired with Nu Wa often enough, and they both have the same kind of body as Patanjali, snake from the waist down and human from the waist up. Mm-hmm. And so Fu Zi is most often depicted with his feminine counterpart. And guess what they're holding? One, of course, the feminine is holding the compass, and the masculine is holding the square. This is Taoism in China. And so Fu Zi is the Thoth energy of Taoism. He is the great teacher of man, and even there's creation stories related to Fu Zi and Nu Wa. He brought man fishing and geometry and everything in between, just like Thoth is the great teacher. So there's a lot of arguments about what Hermetics is, and Hermetics could be, in a sense, the study of 8 elements. As much as it could be the study of secrets and the study of anything to do with mastery related to, fishing through geometry, because that's what these great teachers brought. It's a wonderful dynamic that through the 8 elements come all these divination properties, ways of connecting through, transcending the limitations of our physical senses, maybe, and catching a flicker of intuition like Thoth.
I would like to
Go for it.
Make an observation, not to keep talking about Odin, but when you were talking about him, I've always associated Odin with the number 9. And so I kept thinking, well, how can I reconcile this? And then I realized, he's sitting on the horse with 8 legs.
He's the 9.
He's that one.
He's the one. Yeah. Right.
That then makes 9. Yep. So it made a lot of sense then. I thought, okay. So maybe he uses his horse to traverse the realms, because there's 9 0, just like the tree. And I think that, so in that way, his snake legs is the horse. And he uses it. The snake legs traverse the Quillipot, or the lower worlds, the lower energies, and then the upper man energy is the Separat. So I would say that that's like the Nordic equivalent of that same philosophy. Oh, yeah.
That's beautiful.
That was a nice
that's right
there, Lazarus. Hey, there he is. You talk about him and he shows up.
Yo, that's funny. It was something I was thinking. I don't know where this got. I don't know how my mind got to this, but we're talking about 8, and like you were talking before, and I ended up getting sidetracked looking into it. So I was like, I could have swore I remembered, like, didn't we play 8-bit video games? And I feel like it just repeated from there, like 16, then 32,
right?
64.
Yeah, they totally do. The Commodore 64, right?
I just thought that was weird. I don't know why, but that popped into my head.
It's funny
I wanted to.
Sorry.
Please, please go ahead. Go ahead, Branch.
Somebody mentioned the Ifa or the Yoruba stuff in the chat earlier, and I had heard that artificial intelligence, as we know it, basically came from the low-tech I Ching of the Yoruba, which I didn't know until very recently. So what you just said there about that kind of reminded me of that as well. So a lot of the technology that we have, like with RAM being multiples of 8, and the I Chings kind of also have this numerological component to them. It's like you're kind of tapping into something low-tech wise that's there. and computers are like a high-tech version of tapping into the same energy. So it's like there's this bedrock of mathematics that kind of maybe comes from the 8 elements and these
and I think that polarity system is something that different groups built on and used, but it's not the only thing, right? But it's interesting that so many have used it with the 64, or rather that the two major significant ones, Taoism and Egyptian culture and the ancients. I wanted to mention, so in one sense we see it multiplying and expanding. In another sense, in Egypt, they actually use it as a way to fraction and go the other way. And they relate this, of course, to the Eye of Ra. And they relate the Eye of Ra to how we all perceive the world, right? So back to the eye symbolism, right? So and the Egyptians relate eye symbolism, our sensory capacity symbolized through the Eye of Ra, in this Heket measurement system, which they used for grain. And it was based on the division of 1/2, 1/4, 1/8, 1/16, 1/32, and 1/64. Of this was the primary division of the measurement for grain. So the very important and exoteric.
May I?
Please break it down.
I want to add. I love how easy it is to you're like setting up all these dunks, man. So in Revelation, when it's talking about the 4 horsemen, the black horse comes out and says, a measure of wheat for a penny and a measure of barley for, I think, 2-3 pennies or something like that. So he's talking about the weight and measures,
right,
and how it relates. But again, there's that 4 horsemen deal.
Well, I often think when I see the 4 relationship, especially there, when I see the 4 relationship biblically in relation to death, I think of the 4 canoptic jars, right? The Egyptians were buried. They kept the heart inside. That was the 5th organ that was of ultra importance. And they took out the other 4 organs of major importance and buried them in the canoptic bars, like the canopy, the covering. But the Egyptians, they literally measured their grain via the Hekat fraction system.
Oh, we lost.
So the Hekat, I wonder how that would be spelled. Hekat, maybe?
That was making me think of Hecate. There's so many
to
say her name anyway. So.
Who's at the crossroads, which is where the 8 joins its middle, so maybe there is a weave there. I would
I knew it was the crossroads, but never thought like doing the as above, so below, and that would make like an X or an 8, yeah.
Sure. Which is the sagittal plane where heaven and earth meet, the Quillipot and the Sephirot meet. You could even say that point is Midgard in the Norse tradition, where the lands all kind of converge there at a plane. So yeah, that's a fun weave.
There was a lot. You know what? I'll bring it up. Like people even saying in chat, I thought this was weird. There was some good comments with even with more 8 stuff. Even when I was talking about the 8-bit video game, Teresa mentioned something about 8-track tapes, and I was like, oh yeah. And then I think the way, if I remember correctly, you play it one way and then you turn it around and then it plays the other way. And I even said that's even kind of almost the 8 itself with a twisting of pulleys, if you think about it. And I even said in a sense that's even representing, in my opinion, what I think happens with your eyes with magic. One gets pinned and one gets opened, so that I could see that with the way the turning, in a sense, with those 8 tracks.
And,
one
and
going the opposite way, making the fleur de lis in a sense.
no, that's beautiful. To build on that, one of the most essential Taoist meditation conceptualizations of energy, you end up making an 8 with this imaginary flow of energy where you're connecting with the North Star, for instance, or a star, and rooting with the ground. And so you're kind of, and your center, Dantian, is where that 8 intersection would be. And so you're making this huge in your imagination, but the whole energy flow, it really is 8 kind of.
And another thing, real quick too, before you move on, I just do want to mention too, we also had Zaya Bob also mention this, and I thought this was interesting, even thinking about it with like Himmler, even taking into consideration they had 88. You do have 88 constellations, and you do have 88 piano keys. I know that's not 8, but still, you're getting like double 8s and stuff.
Right. Well, and the whole idea of music to piano keys, it's 7 notes that are called an octave, and there's different ways to look at that. And I'm not a musician to elaborate on the sensibility of that, but it does relate to that frame of consciousness that even when there's a set of 7, you call it an octave.
Yes.
Well, it's just like the rainbow. How the 8th, 0 would be black, the absence. Right. And then as you get up to violet, then when all the colors are present, that's your 8. So your octave is actually when you go up a key to the next key. And sure. So you keep traversing that up and down, And this also reminds me of in chemistry, you have the valence electrons. You always have 8 in your shell, and the noble gases are the ones that occupy that space where they everyone in that family has an 8 in their outer shell, and you get incredible electron affinity in the shell that only has 7. So they have that strong ionization energy to rob the electron from like metal, for instance. So that's why the reaction between salt and sodium and chlorine is so violent, for instance, because it's that 7, it wants to be complete and have 8. Right. So it's like there's this natural tendency for completion to 8.
Yeah. And that's why it's associated with infinity and immortality even, right? Because that's kind of like, what have people been trying to do with alchemy? Right. It's all not necessarily to be immortal in the true sense of the world, but life extension and, controlling, facilitation, the psyche and the self and all these things. And the yin yang quote I said, it's very alchemical in that processing, in this doubling and unfolding from one and the other. And just to wrap it up, if you look Eye of Horus 64 or 1/64th, you'll be able to find the sensory system that is related to the Eye of Horus, that's based on this same mathematics of going from 1 to 2 to 4 to 8 and so on, but in the microcosmic, right? And the perfection in the 63/64ths, in a sense, which the Bagua kind of has the same aspect as that as well, where it's, and all indigenous cultures you'll find have a notion of imperfection or incompleteness, and we see this in the Great Pyramid, right? Where's the head? Where's the capstone? Was it ever there? There's debate on that, right? And so it being incomplete and that being perfect in itself was something that was shared similarity. But the 63/64ths of the eye are very interesting compared to the 64 multiplied of the I Ching.
I would like to know, do you know which fraction is associated with smell in that diagram?
Yes, it's actually In that diagram, it's the majority is smell, 1/2.
Wow. Can
Yeah.
I weave on this for a moment? So if you read the story in Genesis about the fall of man, when Eve is tempted by the serpent, every sense is involved except for the smell. So it's like the purest of our senses.
It was like, it makes me think that it was fake. If he couldn't smell it and he could sense it with every other thing, was it fake?
Well, and fruit come from blossoms, which do have an aroma.
Right.
But,
yeah.
So I think it's interesting that never once does it mention that it smelled good. It's just that it looked good. What she heard sounded good. The serpent was pressed up against her body, so there's touch.
Very interesting.
So that's why I asked, because it made me think of the smell. And I think that the smell, I mean, right behind our nose is the pineal gland, basically. So I think that there might be a connection there, and how it's just basically like a straight shot. Because there's a theory that we used to have fontanelles that hadn't sutured, and that this soft area in our head was what they called the lantern of Horus. And it would allow direct communication, to our pineal gland through the soft tissue, but our bones have ossified over their lantern now. So, it kind of dulls that ability that we have naturally. So it makes me wonder too about the role smell might play in that, because we can still like smell pheromones and things like that too. Of course. So, but thanks for letting me interject there.
No, that's a great build. That's an awesome thought. I think too that the smell is also our most subconscious, maybe due to the potential that you're putting forth there. The smell is our most unconscious sense, and sometimes we don't even know why we don't like a thing, right? We don't even actively smell it.
Something smells fishy.
It's a pheromone thing. It's like on a deeper level than we can articulate, but we have a political reason for why we don't like this. But it really comes down to primal, something we smelled at one time, like.
We have comparatively to like dogs and cats, our smell, and sharks, for instance, our smell is very much weaker than theirs. Sure. But yet you're right. So when we do smell it, it is subconscious really for us. Whereas a dog or a cat, it would be very acute. And go ahead.
I've even said before, just from like past experiences with like incense. I mean, there's been a few times, even like I guess with magic, depending on like probably more of like repetitive use of it. Maybe I just happen to have memories from using it anyway. But there's been times where like I'll catch like smells of something, and a lot of times it'll be like incense that I used, or a candle, or some kind of like mix that I made in the past, and it would almost bring me back like that.
Oh yeah,
such a vivid memory.
I think they say the smell causes the most memory relationships of any sense.
Well, there's that 1/2, and it's funny because I wanted to interject and say that smell is connected to memory and incense, and you said both those things just now. And I think that this is also a reference back to the capstone that you said was missing, because when I was on the show earlier in the week, we were talking about in the Egyptian and Christian traditions, the first piece of land that come up out of the abyss was just an altar, and upon that altar was sacrificed the lamb. In the Egyptian, it's the lamb Ramua, begetter of the ram in the pool. So even in the Egyptian tradition, you got a ram coming out of the abyss and being sacrificed on that top. So the capstone is representative of that sacrifice, and so it's only completed when that occurs, I think. So maybe the octave in a way is like a sacrifice in a sense too. I'm gonna have to sit and stew with all this. This is you guys are really generating a lot of and so the smell of that sacrifice is incense. Prayers are carried with incense, and so the smell aspect that's associated with incense, I think it is indeed memory. And I think that's the purpose of it, is to bring us back in that genetic memory back to the foundation of the earth, back to the foundation of humans or whatever, whether it be a good thing or bad thing. It's meant to bring that genetic memory up out of us, which is why I think maybe it's specific, like with frankincense and myrrh or what have you. And as I'm not a therapist, but I am a counselor. And so with some of my clients, I'll encourage them to use essential oils or something, but a smell that they're not familiar with, and then pair that with something that like they want to study or whatever. And then that way, when they smell it in school or whatever, it'll bring them back, like you were saying.
It's great. Great integration practice. That's awesome. Beautiful, man. I love that concept that you're adding. And it reminds me, the smell and memory relationship is so powerful. And it reminds me too of one of Odin's ravens was memory, right?
Yeah, Hunan and Munin.
Which is just interesting, but of course it would be, but it's just another layer.
Yes. Yeah, no, I definitely think even just from my experience with having that happen to me, I even felt like just the fact of like my memory, I guess, or my mind even going back to wherever that memory was.
Yeah.
And tapping into it and almost like shining a picture behind my eyes to look at.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, that's freaking wild. Like, I was even thinking like, it's kind of weird that you just made your brain do that through smell.
Yeah, and it almost leaves you like a gasp for a minute.
Yeah, it's really weird if you think about it. Like, how did it smell?
Stop and you smell it some more, and you're like, wow.
And I sometimes wonder if that's just like kind of almost like practicing for magical effects. Being able to start going backwards in like time, technically, and seeing it that vivid. Who knows? And that could all be a part of Thoth too, going back and forth.
It's funny. Somebody here in the chat is talking about how they would spray like orange smell in the room to try and make the kids smarter. Orange color is often associated with intelligence or mercury. So I think it's kind of interesting they were told to do this. But I remember also they used to use a certain scent paper in class that made kids concentrate more. Wow. I can't remember what it was that the smell was, but they've used that technique before in schools.
I'm going to mention this, but I'm sure I'm not going to understand it, but this is interesting. Human smell perception is not influenced by the shape of the odor molecule, but by oscillations in which electrons will quantum tunnel across energy gaps in the olfactory receptors.
That's amazing.
Well, that just even sounds like really, I don't know.
I mean, how do you like, it's a very primal sense in the like aspect where if you're hunting, like it becomes like a really utilized thing, I mean, it gets activated. And what do they say? Your body will do only what you mean it to do, so if you're not utilizing it, I'm so not surprised, like you said, it calcified and it's just not active right now.
Well, and what's the derogatory term people get now? Mouth breathers. So people that aren't even breathing through their nose. So they're not smelling things. They're not following their nose.
Oh, wow.
So it's almost like a blindness in a way.
Right.
That's good. I think this would be kind of like a good time to kind of like ask you both, and I think you'd be probably perfect to prove a point that I've been saying. And I really don't think this probably goes for a majority of the listeners either. Maybe just like newer people coming across the channel, or like real occultists, I think would understand this in mystics. But I have come to like the thought where, I mean, I guess Thoth might, or Tahuti, or Thoth, however you want to say his name. I guess like I'll just pick that one because that's who we're talking about. But there are other gods that I think is like the hero's journey. I think that like Thoth is just like a character that's used in that, but like it's like all the same story. It's just different times or different like parts of that journey. You know, and I do think that like Thoth, you might actually see kind of like arc and change characters, but not necessarily be considered Thoth again. You know what I'm saying? You know how I was like saying there's a like Hode or Mercury would be a lower arc of Chesed or Jupiter on the Tree of Life. You know, so I was just wondering like in the way, because like even basically how you guys were talking before, you were even showing similarities between Thoth and other gods anyway. But I mean, do you think that it's a possibility that it's a little bit more than most people kind of realize?
Well,
You
he's
know,
called thrice great, so that would kind of represent the almost like the lady, or excuse me, the maiden and lady crone, or the three phases of life that we kind of go through with the riddle of the Sphinx. You could almost say that he's thrice great. So he's like born again twice. He's born again, and then born again. Kind of reminds me of that axiom. If you die before you die, then you won't die when you die. So, you know, he claims to have obtained immortality. Well, it's that he, you know, had died before he died, but then died again. So it's like there's this deeper level even that maybe some mystics aren't even aware of, because you got to die twice, perhaps.
mm,
And the Taoists too talk about the three, the high, the middle, the low, obviously in its most simple, but also with the heaven, the earth, and the man, with divine dimension, with earthly dimension, and with the dimension of our very psyche. So I think too, Thoth has that thrice great, because he's running it all. He can teach fishing and sacred geometry.
and the
But
reason,
yeah,
go
I
ahead.
mean, you see, I mean, I think the Thoth energy comes up in the Jesus story, and as I was mentioning earlier, Fuzi and his feminine counterpart Nuwa totally demonstrate Thoth, and not even Thoth energy, but you just say Thoth. But the Thoth energy comes up in many different stories. I think maybe because he was so inspirational that he was so popular and thus integrated. You know, he just, people empathized with his inspiration towards mastery, and they brought aspects of him into their teachings.
Yeah, I sometimes just think it's like you even called it, you know, Thoth energy, or I guess I might have said that earlier. I don't know, mentioned it like as energy, but I even like it when I look at the tree. You know, again, Hode is the eighth sphere, and that's where I would consider him with Mercury. And you know, again, you have eight there. You know, even when you like look at the symbolism associated with Kabbalah, the magical image that is supposed to be associated with it. If you look at like tarot and put tarot down on the tree, and just like even see how the male energy does change, even like if you place them in the right way, that I do think it's like kind of like Thoth really is the eighth sphere, and then like it's just a gradual change into different characters as he goes up,
Mm.
you know. So like I do think that like sometimes there's like maybe other ways of showing him, but it's just not Tahuti or Thoth.
Right.
The name also reminds me of Thoth a little bit. It's very close to that word as well.
I think they're intimately related, but etymologically, the mainstream studies don't necessarily say that, but sure seems to be. Thoth and Thoth sure seem to be.
Oh,
Well,
really?
and one of the reasons I say that is because if you read the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, there's this conversation that takes place between him and Poimandres, again, another dragon. And as it's dictating to him the word, he explains how there was the first cause or reason. And that was like the son of Poimandres or something like that. And that kind of reminds me of kind of what we're talking about here. Like reason would be thought. You know, like the age of reason is like a good way to kind of bring that, I guess. That without reason, there couldn't be a reality. No, nothing real.
I was going to mention too that the Egyptian cosmology is so long and over, there's different ways to look at it, but one aspect of it has a four basis that is often construed or considered as a dual basis, right? Like many different things, like the yin and yang, for instance. There's the realm of the living and the realm of the dead, right? Where these are usually the two. But there's also the realm of the gods. And then within the realm of the gods is a place that ascendant beings can go, right? And very few go there. Thoth goes there all the time, right? But there's this minor fourth aspect in that Egyptian worldview or cosmological view. The dead, the living, the gods, and just a little bit of entry point that certain masters can enter. It reminds me of many different, the minor and major yin and yang reminds me of. And it also, in a sense, maybe has an aspect of the first four characters of the Bible. And actually, most every creation story has four characters at their basis and beginning: the masculine and feminine, and the goodness and the detractor of goodness.
You have the three mothers in Hebrew as well, and then it expands out to more. But that would kind of imply how the logos forms. I think the three mothers in Hebrew are Mem, Shin, and Aleph. That would be the matrix, actually. The womb that gives birth to all of the other creation, or those three letters there. It all starts with them. And then every letter is a yod. Several yods together make up different letters in the alphabet. So I think it all starts with a seed. So maybe in the Thoth tradition, reason or the logos is like that seed that, extrapolates upon itself. The 2 becomes 4, the 4 becomes 8. And like everything that we, just like cell division, our human bodies like that in a way.
To the 108, the 108 kind of works like that too. And sacred geometry, the 4 dimensions of sacred geometry, one could perceive it as working like that too. 108 actually also has an energetic symbolism to it. The 1 is the linear energy, the 0 is circular, and the 8 is spiraling. And the point is invisible. But this goes to the idea, often enough, 1008 is utilized just as 108 is. So there's this unsaid aspect. Sorry, please.
Pardon. I don't know if I have a delay or not, but so guess how many beads are on the rosary?
Is there 72?
Oh, 100. Yeah.
108. Okay. Yeah. 108. Cool. Same with the Japamala.
Jainism.
Yeah. The Japamala beads have 108 with one extra bead that's called the Raja bead. And so when they're repeating a mantra, they'll go back and forth.
Raja is a tiger or king or something like that.
King, maybe? Yes. King. Yep.
So that would be the Christ, or
sure,
the Odin sitting on the horse or whatever, whoever's in possession of that chariot, I guess.
And forgive me, but there's other religions that have beads that are in the ratio of 108, either 36 or 72, right? Which is a 2/3 and 1/3 of 108.
Oh, so, excuse me. It's not the rosary, it's the mala, apparently.
Yeah.
Chat corrected me there.
Okay. Yeah. The rosary then, if sometimes it might have 50.
We see 59 here in the chat.
Yeah. Oh, my
Maybe
thing
the +1 would make it 60, perhaps.
Yeah, I know I had something though. I do have these type of beads. I specifically made sure that it was 108 because there is things that you could do that are mantras that go like in 108 cycles. So I do know that there's something out there.
Well, I think you count them too as you're doing the
Yeah,
prayers,
yeah,
right?
to make sure that it's for more of a counter actually. That's why I was saying for 108 times. You use that and you just keep counting the bead.
So I guess for the rosary, it would be like so many Hail Marys, so on and so forth.
And
Welcome
then
back, Ethan.
there
I'm
he is.
back.
Now 108 is to represent the amount of Surya Namaskar. I'm even saying that right. Sun salutations, which is to help connect mind, body, and universe.
And it has the oneness, the nothingness, and the infinite. And
Dude, that's
and then there's the unsaid too, even, which 108 also corresponds with Om in that sense, because Om has the AUM, and then the silence.
See, that's interesting because then if you're thinking of 108, and I'm just thinking of numbers, 93, which is thelemic, you would have to add 15 to get that. And I've been saying over and over and over again, I've been seeing a lot of 15s, and I think there's something behind actually that number. You know how like people get stuck on like 33 and 17. Well, I think there's other ones out there too, and I think 15 is one of them because I have seen it quite a lot, and especially like in almost in like a situation of like chaos or change. It's
Because
always
I was gonna add that 14 is sometimes noted as the number of parts that Osiris got cut up into.
Yeah.
Sometimes he was noted to be cut up in different numbers of pieces and maybe not necessarily pointed to a number at all. But the 14 in the sense of completion, and then 15 being following that, is the 14 is the 2 weeks. And you start to multiply that, and then you get a rebirth cycle of 9 months, this Osiris rebirth legend.
Now, what in this case, the 1 though would be his phallus, which was swallowed by the fish, right? So then it became a golden phallus.
Yeah, well, then there's only 13 parts, I guess. But I think, isn't there ultimately, I think there's maybe too many, maybe there's 2 versions of that, because maybe in one version he doesn't find his phallus, and in another version, Thoth helps him get it back. So I'm not sure about that. But I know you're right. Yeah, he loses it, and then I think might get it back. I'm not 100%.
Well, and 13's the death tarot, so it kind of jives with that story too, a little bit.
And I've seen this spooky picture of one of these elitists of our country. They'll have like the 14 and the fish on their palm, right? They do some they do some mockery.
Cut the left finger and eat the
They
pain.
cut their finger. They have a fish and the 14. I don't know if it relates to that, but it sure does seem.
It does actually.
So it's very, again, and you'll find them or people practicing these things, and sometimes in mockery, not necessarily like really celebrating it in respectful manner. So whatever.
I think the fish might be on the palm, right? Which when you see the hand of the mysteries in alchemy, there's the fish in the palm that represents alchemy. There's often 2 X's or 3 X's maybe there with it.
Wow.
So,
something I was thinking about that you guys were talking about earlier, and then I think we went into something else, but I did want to keep the thought because I do find it interesting, and it kind of correlates back to like eyeball stuff though too. So for people out there that are interested in this, this might be interesting. You were like even talking about like I think 3 separations before, or I think somehow like we're getting into 3. I do think I could be wrong. If anybody's in the chat, correct me if I'm wrong, or let me know after the fact. But I'm almost positive it's not in the Gnostic Mass. I'm almost positive I've seen it in something associated with the OTO where they do, I think, 3 slices like across their body in different areas. So I had wondered about that, and you were talking about like the numbers 2 to 8, and I do believe like that's what you're seeing with like Thoth's path is like those even numbers, replicating. But that's also kind of goes along with the size of your pupils. They will go from 2 millimeters to 8 millimeters, but it's done in sections or like times 3 in a sense. It will go from 2 to 4, 4 to 6, and then 6 to 8. And then it screws too. So like I don't know, I was thinking a lot about like just the numbers again, the 2 to 8 and the separations. It's done in 3 times, and you see that done. It was just like weird stuff that up into my.
And Young said that where there are 3, there's the 4th, the unsaid 4th, which I think is applicable to the 7 and the 8 idea as well. Where there's 7, there's the unsaid 8. And back to the original, the ancient primal gods of Egypt, the Neters, the one that might correspond to the missing aspect, if there were to be, would be the abyss, the primal feminine. And also I wanted to mention too, in the ancient Greek celebration of 7, which is where we get a lot of our notions of the value of 7. I'm not saying it's not valuable. There is the 7 spheres, but it's important to consider, hey, where are we? We would be the 8th in that model, right?
That's a good point. Yeah, could be. Yeah.
You said something that reminded me of alchemy. Once again, I got alchemy on the brain today. The 4 out of 3 is shown in the geometry of the rebus illustration, where he's rising up, the hermaphrodites rising up out of the egg with the 4-3 diagram, or is it 3 out of 4? I think it's 4 out of 3 actually. But that's what that reminded me of.
And you remind me of another alchemy. No, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, go ahead, because if it's alchemy related.
Well, it was just in line with what you're saying, that many notions of the Philosopher's Stone talk about getting the 4th from the 3, and that's that's in line with your depiction there.
Because you're multiplying the stone too, and adding qualities to it, and refining it, like the 2 dragons, for instance, the red and white. So that would be like your rebus and albedo, I think, as it's going through that process, and then they receive their crown, which is like a completion and refinement. I was reading about antimony earlier as well, but what I was going to add wasn't alchemy related, so that's why I wanted you to go ahead. But did you hear the news? There's going to be a funeral later this week for 9, is 7, 8, 9. And so if you guys out there feeling for 9 after it got cannibalized by 7, just remember 9 in your prayers.
Oh man, I was going to say so. I hate to put you on the spot either, but I was thinking about maybe we'll talk about this for a little bit, and then maybe we can wrap it up after this. But I know it's something that you have talked about on my show before, so I know it's not like totally throw you off guard. But going back to like 4, how you were saying like the 1 and the 3, I've been saying that I've seen that a lot in a lot of like neither true crime or occultism and just other things, even with the eye. So I was wondering, like, if you wanted to, like, maybe we could all like kick around like the 1 and the 3 and the 4 for maybe a little bit.
Absolutely. I'm always into that. Well, you initially remind me of the taboo nature of 13, which is the 1 and the 3.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And in the East, the same type of taboo, where in some countries and some cities at some points in time, they didn't have a 4th floor. Just like some buildings here might not have the 13th, right? And
Wow.
four.
You know why they changed that? They were like, listen, we got to make as much money as we can. So we'll make a 1 and a 3 because it's matches 4. So now we can go up to 12.
I mean, I just thought that was just such a psychological flaw when you do that, But
Yeah.
but that's how taboo 13 was
Yeah.
in some places, and how taboo 4 is in some places. In the East, it's in Mandarin and Japanese and Korean even. I think 4 is a homonym with death, right? So that's where they get this kind of, not always a fear of 4, but like a woe of 4. And actually, in the West, we would have this and more a couple 100 years ago, and certainly 1,000 years ago. There's time periods and places where people would be killed for saying the Tetragrammaton or saying the 4-lettered word for God.
Yeah. That's why it was taken out of the Bible.
Right, and it would just be well, we see it now. It's Lord even is a substitute for the Tetragrammaton, and sometimes there's papers and writings where they would have a dot or 4 dots because it just wasn't supposed to be mentioned aloud. And even when you were reading it, even if you were a purveyed scholar, you weren't supposed to even think it in your
well, but I think that's terrible in a way too, because now
totally.
so many people don't know the name of God, and it says very clearly, like in Scripture, call upon the name of the Lord. Well, you're not really using His name anymore, so it's
what is it? Right? What is Lord?
So it's kind of ironic.
Some Bibles have like an asterisk, like Adonai, Elohim, exactly. Lord. What you go back and what is that? Tetragrammaton.
Yeah.
But wait, let's break down Tetragrammaton real quick. And why is it so taboo? On a really metaphysical level. Tetragrammaton, let's get to the metaphysical in a second. In the most basic level, Tetragrammaton, what it most fundamentally means is 4 grammar. And grammar is mathematical and linguistic understanding. Back in the day, there wasn't numbers, there was letters, right? That's why like Greek numbers are X, they're letters. So grammar was like gematria in a sense, or like the study of a certain science. You have a whole grammar set up to how to work a kennel or something. You have a whole
like
grammar,
a lingo or jargon.
It's a lingo, but a serious lingo, right? It's a grammar, of understanding what.
I love how you use the Roman numerology for that.
And it really is. Grammar is. That's why we say, like, if I go get some weed, is there 28 grams in this ounce?
Or in the soul, there's so many grams that the soul is supposed to weigh, right?
Right. So I think it's 23 grams. They say when you'll zap.
So if you don't want your soul to weigh more than that feather of mat, so maybe it weighs 23 grams, that feather.
Right. Beautiful. And so the Tetragrammaton is the Greek name for the Hebrew name for God, the 4-letter Hebrew word for God. And it's said that Hebrew, and I think we can find this true for many different teachings, but it's said that the language of Hebrew has its metaphysical and obvious interpretations and understandings. And if we break down the 4 individual letters of the Tetragrammaton, it actually depicts the 4 dimensions of geometry. You have the point. It's literally a point.
Mhm.
And you have the line, and which is it's a nail. It's like a peg is often the translation, right? These are the exoteric properties of these letters, but the esoteric, the metaphysical, is that it's the point, the line, and then you have the repeated letter, which is the circle and the sphere or the solid, right? And so in the Tetragrammaton, in the most widely read book in the West, what is it? What is God? It's the four dimensions of sacred geometry. I mean, you can't make it up, but it sounds like I am.
Sounds like the great architect.
That's right. That's what the true master builder is, good sir. Noting that relationship, that's what the true master builder is, the one that can be the created and create. And
dude, you were talking about the square and the compass earlier, and it just hit me all of a sudden. In the Masonic Lodge, the square, compass, and Bible are on the altar in the middle. So you got your 3 there. So maybe 3 and 4 is this relationship of the Tetragrammaton to those 3 things, the lesser lights. So
I see there's the Tetragrammaton in the Bible right off. Not that I'm not necessarily as knowledgeable as you on this, but I think of the joining of with the measurement system of the square and the compass. In the exoteric sense, you have the joining of feminine and masculine into what? Creation, right? So there's that, and it's a measurement system. And just like with Thoth, he's the sacred geometer that can measure the immeasurable, right? That can measure that can come up with these divination concepts and understand the spiritual, the intangible,
the ineffable in some cases.
The ineffable, beautiful, yeah, exactly.
And when we were talking about the 8 earlier and the analemma, it got me thinking too of how a pendulum can be used. And so I almost imagine, like at the dawn of creation, the creation of the moon and the sun, as they kind of did their analemmas, they're measuring out. It's like a pendulum, like if you were to hold a pendulum and trace out it talks about that in the Bible a lot.
It comes up with, it just does an 8, huh? Yeah.
The plumb line, I guess, is what I was thinking of.
Well, I was thinking about this. What you said just reminds me of. I was thinking about Masonry and the 3. The 3. What is the expression? Death comes in 3s.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and so if we look at the life story, sometimes we could put it into 3 concepts: birth, life, death.
Oh man!
And there's 3 of us on the stream. Reminds me of the maiden lady crone and the Sphinx story once again. And 3 phases of life.
What I was gonna say about even with 3, I don't know how you look at it, but like I know, like in ceremonial magic will be like Yod He Vav He, YHVH. And I mean, if you look at that, technically you're only using 3 letters.
Yeah, because 1 repeats. That's a good point.
Yes.
In fact, the He is your arms and legs. So the 2 parts that repeat are actually there on your body too, because the Yod He Vav He is also the vessel of the human body and the image of God, as it were.
Yeah, I don't know if you heard anything that I had said, Ethan.
I didn't know.
I was saying with, in like ceremonial magic, I'm used to like Yod He Vav He is being the 4, but that's only 3 letters.
Right.
Again. So I do find that interesting how you're still getting only 3 and then a 1. Yes.
I think it's due to the
Well,
exoteric nature of describing circle and sphere, right? Because the sphere is the most maybe perfect is the wrong word, but the maybe best depiction of a solid, right?
Or the circumference.
Yeah. So and actually, if you look at tarot has this 4-dimensional sacred geometry in it too. The cup is the sphere, right? The coin is the circle. And so in a 3-dimensional depiction of a 2-dimensional depiction of a sphere and a circle, you kind of have the same letter or the same drawing. But so the and of course the sword is the point and the wands are the lines. But I was going to say Jesus has the story of 4 in his whole life story, and birth, life, death, and the magic, the resurrection. And when we've gone through a death process, not necessarily literally, but the resurrection or the reunification, that's where it really is a transcendent process. And the Tetragrammaton, the 4 elements of that, I think there is definitely the chemical aspect of the 4 elements of alchemy, but there's also, what do they say behind alchemy? You have to have the appropriate mindset for any of this to work. And I feel like you got to have faith. You got to have the right orientation within, or this physical 4 elements that you know of, it's not going to work. And I feel like there's the 2 definitions of element. The element is the chemical constitution, and it's also the parts of a thing, the parts of a set.
Oh, dude, mint a lot of times in what Latin or Greek is mind, and L is a lot of times associated with God. So you can almost say like element is almost like God mind.
Oh wow,
yeah.
It's
I've
right
never
there.
made that connection before.
It's right there. It's element. Just like that's
Godhead.
That's beautiful, man. That's that brings out the Tetragrammaton in a beautiful way. That's excellent.
I had somebody one time in chat, or I don't know if it was in chat or if they left it as a comment. They mentioned something about actually studying the element chart, looking at it from an occult aspect. And I actually was like, I've thought of doing that before, so maybe there is something behind that. Somebody else even mentioned
there's the Salts of Salvation is a book, and in alchemy you can assign different compounds with each of the zodiac signs, zodiacal signs. So if you're born as an Aries, like me, for instance, then you might be missing other certain salts. And so you want to consume those in your diet so that you get that balance back, because you're missing 3 months worth of salts. Teresa mentioned here in the chat about the Masons being obsessed with 3, not acknowledging the master of this 4th. Well, in the story of Hiram Abiff, who is the master, and he has that ineffable word, the 3 ruffians accost him and kill him, trying to get it. He won't give it up. Yeah,
he's the 4th.
And there's then a deeper dimension to it where they then resurrect him, but can't resurrect him completely. They can only resurrect his skeleton or his bones, which is very Saturnian. And that's how they're able to get some of the word back, but not all of it. And so that's why they say that they are still searching for the lost word. It's whatever Hiram knew. And she mentions also Acts 4:11-12 that Jesus says, Jesus is the stone that was rejected by the builders, which has become the head of the cornerstone. So just like Hiram being slain, Jesus was slain in a similar attitude there about having the secret, which he's the 5th element to the Tetragrammaton. And much in the same way, Hiram's the 4th element to the 3 thing there. But the 3 zodiacal signs associated with the death of Hiram would be the, I think it was Capricorn, Scorpio and Sagittarius, perhaps. I could be wrong about that. It's been a while since I looked at it, but it's usually the winter months. So if you look at that through a periodic chart, you could even look at the salts that are associated with that. And of course, that would be the thigh. Sagittarius is thigh, Capricorn's the knee, Scorpio would be the generative area, which in the Chariot card, that's where the legs are usually cut off, is at that point too. So maybe there's something to it.
I found that interesting with the 3 and the 1. I didn't even realize that. I'm still sorry. Yeah, it's like,
well, and they killed him with the tools in the temple. So he was struck the first time, I think, with the ruler. And then I think the next one was square, and then the third was the maul in the head.
That'll do it.
Yeah. Which is a head wound, and the Antichrist has association with the deadly head wound that was healed. So I often think about that story whenever you hear
that. I was going to say, in the Bible, there's a blessing, and it uses the word countenance. There might be more than one blessing that uses the word countenance. And the word countenance, it implies or means the face of God and the Tetragrammaton. But it most literally means, may the count 10. Right? So in countenance is the word count 10. Ints. The quality of count 10, may it bless you. What do they mean by count 10? Not necessarily the decimal system, actually the 1 point, the 2 points for the line, the 3 points for the minimum number to create a plane, and 4 points for the minimum number to create a solid. That's the count 10 is sacred geometry of God.
10's a lot of times associated with the completion as well, like a perfection.
Right. Well, and I think to the sacred geometry idea, right? Or at least maybe it's not the origination, but it has that set of completion in it, the 10 points.
I'd like to weave back here on the earlier you mentioned the Tetragrammaton, how it was like a point that emanated down into the line, and then so on and so forth. Well, it put me in mind of a tent. I've seen the Tetragrammatons a lot of times like a pyramidal type shape. Right. And the Meru Foundation online does a lot of Hebrew studies, and they have an incredible rabbit hole you can go down, where he created this metal thing that he puts into his hand, to where he models his hand after like the Yod character. And the Hebrew language is as such that if you can make every single Hebrew letter as a shadow on the wall with your hand. So the hand is the Yod, actually. And and he fits this shape. It is like half of a torus. It can fit inside of an apple, can also fit in the side of the palm of your hand. And he's able to use it in that way. And so the Tetragrammaton itself is that. It is like that shadow. But it requires light to work. So the Hebrew language itself is a shadow of the light, what the light's casting. So I think I just found that all so remarkable. You got me thinking of the tent. And this is like there's like a lantern inside a tent. And that's the eyeball and the triangle that we see. I think it's kind of that symbolism there too.
Shit. Because I don't want to forget this. You guys are talking about the tent, and now you said the light. I even think that light might even possibly be like in the lamp that the hermit is holding, which, if depending on how you look at it, could.
Yeah, he has a Yod in there in some cases. Yeah, exactly.
But so I know from my experiences in the OTO, and I'm pretty sure in other ones too, you will see tents at some point, some sort of neither ceremony or initiation. You know, from my experience, you will see
Well,
a
and
tent.
that's the spirit of Yahweh descended into the tents of the Hebrews, and they would speak with them and talk with them, and particularly with Moses and Joshua, we see that story. So maybe it's a connection to that. I would also associate the tent in that way with almost like an Abramelin type feel to it, like retreating into the wilderness. And also in fall, the Hebrews are instructed to go out into the woods for the time of tabernacles and construct a tent out of branches and wood. And the requirement is that you have to be able to see the stars through the roof. So it's not completely covered. It's just a shelter, so that you're kind of relying on God to protect you from the elements. So very much a Yud Hey Vav Hey kind of feel there. I think the angel would be in the doorway protecting you.
You know, another thing, Lazarus was joking, but like even you do see clown symbolism and carnival symbolism. I think is used.
Well, that's the fool.
I mean, I would even say you could even look at maybe possibly stuff like that. You know?
North Star, Axis Mundi symbolism there too.
And I even have thought, in my opinion, and looking at tarot too, where it falls, and from doing the eyeball series, I have questioned if the tent is to symbolize the optic nerve, and then the light would actually be like going back up the optic nerve, you know, where sunlight turns into electricity, is converted into electricity. So, because the optic nerve, if you were to go look at it, could be looked like a tent. I have seen Empress cards that have been drawn that, to my opinion, do have a certain flow to the card, or they're in their way to kind of look like an optic, the optic nerve hanging down like that. Almost honestly, even like old ways that some churches are made like that. They even, have that look to it.
Well, that your tattoo, I can't remember. It's like a recursive star or something. I can't remember the name of
the
it.
intercrystal hexagram, yeah.
That reminds me of the Lucifer sigil with the eyes, how it kind of crosses the optic nerve there. It's very much like,
and it reminds me too of the word occult and the word octave and the eye, right? What's the word for eye that has the OC? Sorry, I just am spacing it.
Oculus or
the Oculus. Yeah, ocular studies, right? So there's the OC in all of this, which is
yeah.
Or to be oracular. Oracle.
If you go look up, you could go see. I mean, I made a post about it not too long ago. NASA, I forgot. I think they were like explaining how they screwed up on like one of their telescopes, and they show you how the light reflects, and it's the same exact fucking thing as the tattoo. Same exact thing.
Well, and it's actually our reality's flipped. Our brain has to flip it.
Right.
Yeah, it's as above, so below.
So, yeah. It's pretty wild when you think about it.
On your lens, exactly. That's what happens on your lens. Shit gets flipped back.
Yeah.
I think we'll wrap it up there if you guys don't mind.
Cool. Yeah, that was excellent. That was really inspiring. Thank you for the build.
Definitely a great talk with both of you on. That's why I made it happen.
That was awesome.
Branch, real quick, remind everybody where they can find you at. And if you want to plug your old YouTube or whatever, anything like that, go for it. But didn't you have like an old
you can find me on YouTube. Recorded several shows with a partner. It got nuked, so we had to rename it. She named it Abby Someone, and MPC 3.14 and Abby Someone. We did about 60 streams together. We would do the Psalms, do some look at the stars and placements of the planets each time we do a show, tracking current events and prophecy, those sorts of things. So it was a lot of fun, very interesting shows. probably over the course of 3 years. So it really cataloged a lot of the chaos that was going on in the last few years. You can also find me on Telegram as The Branch, or on Instagram as Appalachian Aesthetic. I really love meeting new people and having conversations. So hit me up.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And I'm pretty sure I have that stuff in the bottom. If I don't, I will add it after the fact. And Ethan, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Of course, of course. And let everybody know about your stuff again.
Yeah, I have books on Amazon. I got a little YouTube thing on all the social media. Ethan Indigo should be pretty easy to find usually, and I'll try to make interesting stuff here and there.
Don't you even have like a website that you add stuff to also?
Yeah, I got a couple Weebly sites. Geometry of Energy has a bunch of stuff on there. A Matrix of Four.
I think I included something. I know I included the one.
Wonderful.
I put that in there. Yeah, something of yours.
Yeah,
and I've checked it out. So yeah, I have those links in the bottom. And thank you both again very much for coming on, and thank you everybody in the chat. We had a lot of people in the chat. I threw up comments, put them up on the screen. You know, I mentioned some of them. That's what's up. I love it. There was a great discussion in the chat, and I think there was a lot of information in the chat as well. So if you're watching the video, I highly suggest to check out the chat.
Yeah, it was very interactive. I really loved hanging out with the chat too.
Hell yeah, yeah, I saw that. I was like, yo, this is great. He's even typing in the chat too. That's what's up. So yeah, it was a good time tonight. Thank you all. I had a pretty fun and interesting Friday night. So that's what's up. And that is the end of another Occult Rejects. And until the next one, everybody be well. Later.